Welcome back, Troglodytes, to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Man, it feels good to be back to my old used instruments again. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about the Doublecut Les Paul Standard, its origins, and what I think of it, because this is my very first one. So let's start with the origin of these things. They were initially designed to compete with PRS. I mean, do they kind of look like a PRS? Well, that's what they were going for. But you cannot call this a copycat design because PRS took inspiration from the same model that these were designed from. The late 50s Doublecut Junior and Special, before they turned into the SG body shape. So that's essentially what these are. They're just that Doublecut Special or Junior, now with humbuckers, additional frets, and a beautifully flamed maple top. You also have Les Paul Standard appointments to them, so it's just a blinged out Doublecut essentially. But let's dig a little bit deeper into the history of the Doublecut design. Whatever happened to it after it turned into the SG? They kind of fused it with the Les Paul and adapted the melody makers to look similar. But then they turned it into this freaky fish thing. Trust me, these things are crazy looking, but they are phenomenal players. But then, once again, those were replaced by the SG body shape around 1967, and the Doublecuts just kinda disappeared. The Doublecut Melody Maker was then reissued in the mid-70s. The next time we saw it was a limited edition run in the late 70s by a music shop called La Tosca. They had an exclusive made one. They made about 50 of them per year from 1978 until 1980. They're kind of freaky looking thing. They're kind of collector's items at this point. Not really many people know about them, so values aren't too crazy. But the next production run, it's kind of in the early 80s, called the Gibson Spirit. There was the Spirit 1 and the Spirit 2. Basically, that meant either one humbucker or two humbuckers. They were usually uncovered double white pickups. There were also Epiphone variants out there. And then throughout the 80s, they kind of toyed with the Doublecut design. There was one called the XPL. It was a Doublecut Les Paul with a real Les Paul cutaway and an Explorer headstock. Yeah, those things are freaky, but you can bet I'll get one of those one day if I can find one without a Kaler on it. But then when Gibson changed hands, in the mid-80s, around 86, 87, into the Henry J era, which is a lot of fun, the whole shape just kind of disappeared for a while. In 1989, they introduced the classics. They've got the prehistoric reissues starting to gain steam. Gibson is coming back as a company, but it's around this time when the birth of a large competitor starts. And that's in 1985, PRS opens its doors officially as a manufacturer. So while Gibson's classic designs are starting to come back, people are buying them, and they open up the custom shop officially in 93, they're starting to feel pressure from PRS cutting into their market share of this new kind of Doublecut design. So what does Gibson do? They designed their own PRS-like Doublecut. And these were introduced in 1998. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I buy a Doublecut? Didn't I just do a Y-Rin that told us a bunch of this stuff? Yes, but I got this one for a very specific reason. I got my hands on one of the prototype Doublecuts, so I got this one to do a comparison video between the two. So I can tell you with absolute certainty, this was a long time in the making. The prototype for the Doublecut Les Paul actually dates back to very late 1992, before the custom shop officially opened. So from about 1998 through 99, and then they reintroduced it again from 2001 till about 2006 or so, the Doublecut standards existed. They're not necessarily everybody's favorite design because, let's face it, they're a little bit goofy looking in comparison. But I find if you start thinking of them as PRS guitars but with a Gibson headstock, they start to make more sense visually. So what were the differences between a Doublecut Les Paul standard and a regular Les Paul standard? This is a Les Paul Studio. I'm sorry, I don't have a 98 standard on me, but this will kind of help you visualize. The biggest thing, well, you got a Doublecut shape, right? It's not really a Les Paul horn. You see how that's really rounded off, whereas this is more like the DC Junior and Special style. It's flat along the edges of the neck and then kind of curves up. Something else you might notice is this has 24 frets versus 22, so a full 2-octave scale. But notice, that also changes the location of the neck pickup, because these are both still a 24 3/4 inch scale. So do you see the difference between the pickup spacing? That's just because that neck pickup was simply moved down, which does change the tones. Speaking of tones, this is something I learned by getting this. These have long neck tenons. That's kind of like a historic spec. But they had to do that because, well, they needed more support. Because on a regular Les Paul, you've got more wood surrounding the neck, whereas these, they need the additional support. Control layout-wise, these are simplified master volume, master tone, 3-way toggle switch, so you don't have the dual controls for each pickup. Something else is these pretty much always got really nice figured flame maple tops. You can find them in this natural ambered finish. There's also some fruitier flavors out there, but they pretty much all had nice tops. The standards of the day, you can't really say the same thing for them. They're usually really nice looking plain tops. Nothing against them, but they're not as flamey as these guys. Switching over to the back side here, these guys have comfort carves on the back, so they're a little bit more comfortable to play if you're sitting down with them or standing up, because the traditional Les Paul style does not have that. Something else you might not realize is they are a thinner body. It's not by much, but it's definitely noticeable when you're playing these. I first noticed it when I was looking at the output jack plates. They use kind of a long rectangular one on these because of the smaller body versus the squared one on a regular Les Paul. Something I had never really took the time to realize is these standards, the double cuts, they got gold hardware. That's not something you would normally find on a Les Paul standard unless it was something like a limited edition. You will generally find chrome. Measurement-wise, the nut width is 1.65 on this guy, so that's a little bit slimmer than what you'll typically find. I usually measure like 1.69 on a regular Les Paul. But despite all those differences, you still have a maple top, you've got your mahogany body, you've got the mahogany neck, and you have the bound rosewood fretboard on both the standards. The only other significantly different thing is these guys are chambered. All of them are chambered. That was really new for a Les Paul at the time. Chambering as a whole didn't really start on Les Pauls until like late 2006, early 2007. Then it switched from chambering to like ultra modern weight relief. Yeah, it's a whole nother rabbit hole. But these guys are coming out around the same time as like the Les Paul Elegant, using a similar style of chambering there. So that makes these super lightweight, though a little bit neck heavy. But I personally thought this instrument, it felt good. I mean, it's not like a Les Paul, but it's still familiar feeling to like a Gibson. The magic of these is just thinking of them as like PRS guitars, and then it just, you know, it all makes sense at that point. You've got high-end appointments on these, like binding on the neck with the trapezoid inlays. It feels like a high-end Gibson. It plays and feels and sounds great. The tones are a little bit different due to the shifted neck pickup, but I mean, it's nothing too crazy. And I really like the pronounced belly carve these guys have. They've got a pretty nice dish to them. Now, the only thing that I felt was bad about these is, look, you've got 24 frets, right? I sure hope you don't want to use them because, yeah, you can't get those extra 2 frets. What was even the point? I mean, if you reach over like this, yeah, you can get them. But what the point is, you can easily get to all 22 frets. Because take a look at where my hand is here. I'm not even touching the heel yet, and I'm reaching the 22nd fret. On a Les Paul, to get to the 22nd fret, look how much I'm hugging the heel. It's not comfortable. So as far as the Gibson world goes, these really do have unparalleled upper fret access. You can't get to the additional 2 frets they added, but you can get everything that you traditionally would want on a Gibson though. So I hope that helps you understand the whole double cut Les Paul. I've never been a huge fan of these, but you know, now that I've tried one, I can definitely see the appeal to them. My interest has recently been piqued in these because of like the new 2019 models, the double cut tributes, such as the Special and Junior that I've also done reviews on. Epiphone even did a DC Pro that I also reviewed. So you're probably wondering, is it about time for Gibson to bring these things back? There's been the modern double cut, which nobody really ever paid attention to because they just made it so darn expensive, both in the solid and semi-hollow versions. Then there's a signature guitar for a guy named Tak Matsumoto. So will we see Gibson's new ownership bring back the double cut standard under the modern lineup one day? I almost think we might. They might change things up, but I think they're kind of testing the market with those DC specials and juniors to see if there would be a demand for a higher end one. You know, build up the market with those cheap ones and then offer a higher end version. We might see those in the future. But let's go ahead, throw this one on the workbench so we can document its individual parts as well as see how it was constructed. Starting with our pickups here. On the underside of these, they just read Gibson USA. It's kind of difficult to identify pickups in this era because they didn't put any stickers on them to tell you it's the 490R, 498T. You kind of have to go based on the DC readings. So this one, bridge pickup is reading about 13.15, which definitely falls within the 498T range. And the 490Rs are usually about half that. This one reads a little bit hotter, so I'm not even 100% sure if that's the pickup set original to this one, but that would be my best educated guess. You can see the gold covers on this example. They're pretty worn from being played. Within the cavity routes themselves, the neck pickup reveals the long neck tenon, which is something I did not know these instruments had. I'm really thankful I tried one of these out because that's a selling point to me. And then you have the markings AS. The official color title for this was translucent amber, so I'm not really sure what the S might stand for. The Les Paul standard, that's either a lowercase d or most likely a 2 for double cut. You can see these little circles, that's from when they were making the cavity. The bridge on these is the standard Nashville styled one of the era. This one, the gold's pretty worn off of it, and there's no real markings on these besides these 4 tooling marks along the edge. The tailpiece doesn't have too much going on either. The control layout, very simplified. You just have a master volume, master tone with a 3-way selector switch. So you no longer have individual controls, but it definitely streamlines the look of this instrument. Furthermore, looking in the cavity, you can see it's a maple top, just in case you missed it with all this figuring and flame, but that is on top of a mahogany body, which just absolutely looks beautiful in there. And you have a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. Again, we've got 24 frets and trapezoid inlays, and you can see this one's definitely been worked on. I mean, that might have came from the factory with that tooling mark, but I'm guessing somebody's level recrowned these things, because this was definitely a player's instrument, and you can just tell it when you pick this thing up. It's got a really special aurora about it. Now, as far as condition goes of the fretboard, you can see there's some minor fingernail scratches and divots in this board just from being played so much, but the frets themselves, they're in very good shape until you get to kind of the cowboy court area. That's when you can start to see some very light divoting, but it's nothing that you necessarily have to get addressed right away. And here under the light, you can see some more of that fingernail wear. This is a very mild case of it. Sometimes it's like an actual valley, and that's when I kind of go, I don't like that. But this stuff, I didn't even notice it until I got the strings off. Face of the headstock, our truss rod is in good shape. The threads are about even with the top of the nut, so that means you have a long way to go with this truss rod. You've got the Les Paul model silkscreen and the Gibson mother of pearl logo. Now, as is common, you can see the tooling lines around there. That's just how they did the inlay process. And if you get in the light just right, you can kind of see the outline of the silk screen, which you can't always see, but this example, it's very prevalent. The nut width is a little bit skinnier at 1.65 inches, but traditional at the 12th, 2.04. Neck depth at first fret, 0.82, and beefs up a little bit at the 12th, 0.93. And despite looking like they might have a longer scale with additional frets, they are a traditional 24 3/4 inch scale. Moving on to the back, again, it's your mahogany body. You've got a little bit of a comfort cut right here, so that's another difference between a standard, and these are chambered. It makes them really lightweight and super comfortable. So what you're seeing here is the exposed maple top. You've got your 2 Gibson branded pots with your 3-way toggle switch. And it kind of has like the Les Paul Elegant style chambering, where it's just kind of chambered around the controls like that. It's kind of hard to see up in there, but you can just take my word for it, okay? You've got more of a rectangular output jack plate instead of a square. You've got your traditional style strap buttons here, one down here, and then one on the top horn. And this is how the neck meets the body. It's kind of flat in this area, but there are some other more rounded versions out there. Now the neck profile on this one, it's kind of wide feeling, but rounded at the same time, so it's definitely a very slim feeling neck. No volute or anything like that, and stock you would have Grover tuners. Traditional serial number 1998, 197th day of the year, 400 looks like 82nd in production for the day, and made in USA. This particular example weighs 7 pounds 5.7 ounces. All right, we'll run through the tones here real quick. Neck pickup. Middle position. Bridge pickup. So it's kind of your typical sounds out of these pickups. I mean, the neck is a little bit different, the middle's a little bit different due to the positioning of that pickup, but still very familiar. Now that we know all about this instrument, if you're interested in purchasing it, we have a lot to go over condition-wise, so feel free to join me. Man, it feels like I haven't had to talk about the condition of a guitar for almost a month. This thing is beat, it's worn, but this thing was somebody's daily player. And if you've ever picked one of those guitars up, you know they're good. I had a buddy come over, he fell in love with this thing of how it sounded and played. So face of the headstock, very, very worn. When you get it in the light, there's tons of scratches all over. You also have the typical lacquer shrinking lines around the Gibson logo. You can also see it around the Les Paul model silkscreen. There's a lot of light chips to the lacquer on the face of the headstock. I mean, it definitely is a worn instrument, and it shows it at the top. Truss rod is perfectly functional. Your nut is original. The fretboard on this is so incredibly smooth. I love it. I just polished up the frets, I cleaned the fretboard and conditioned it. You are good to go for a long time on this one. Now frets do show a little bit of wear as we saw in the bench demo, but it's mainly isolated just to like the first 4 or so. Nothing that you necessarily need to get addressed right away. The face of the instrument has lots of nicks and dings. Some of these are more distracting than others, so definitely pay attention here as the light goes around, as there's quite a few on here. The owner of this one did not care about condition. He maintained it well, but I mean, there's definitely some excessive dents and dings on the top because this was his tool of the trade. It wasn't a collector's item. I would say right here is definitely the worst ding on the instrument. The gold hardware is very worn, especially on the pickup covers. You got a little bit here on the bridge, but the tailpiece, it's not too bad. All the electronics worked fine. Back of the headstock here, you can see the Grover tuners. Similar to all the rest of the gold hardware, it's been worn pretty all the way through. You've got lots of scratches and scuffs along the edges of the headstock here. got kind of an impression line right there, and there's quite a large ding in the back of the headstock right here. So no breaks, cracks, or repairs to mention, but you do have some light finish checking on the neck. I'll see if I can find it again, because I honestly didn't see it until I was just looking at it at the light just right. It kind of continues off of the fret sprout cracks that you'll see at the edge of the fretboard, pretty much all up and down this instrument. I mean, it's nothing major, it's just in the finish. The backside of the instrument also has quite a few nicks and dings. Mainly this one is like super prevalent. I'm not even sure how he did that. Did he get shot by a BB or something? But you also have some buckle worming marks and the such. Looking around the edges of the instrument, similar wear to the rest of the instrument. You've got nicks and dings, some of them deeper than others. I almost think the strap buttons might have been filled and re-drilled. You'll kind of see that on this top bout because it's got some finish blemishes. I can show you that right now. But the strap buttons are definitely secure. So this is a player's instrument. If you're looking for a collectible one, definitely pass this one up. But if you're looking for a great playing double cut standard, I think you'd be happy with this one. Now we'll do a blacklight test. This one's glowing beautifully. You can see where the sweat has absorbed here. This definitely looks a lot older than it is because it's been gigged a lot. Knobs glow beautifully as well. Look at the back side of the instrument. No touch-ups here. The sides of the instrument are also looking pretty good. And the back of the neck is glowing the way I would expect to see, with no breaks, cracks, or repairs here. And the face of the headstock is also looking good. This instrument comes in an error-correct Gibson USA case. The top part of the combo lock has been taken off, but you've got 1, 2, 3, and a 4th back latch here, still functional. You can see there's lots of scuffs. This was used to gig. There's sticker residue. I mean, it doesn't have any smoky odors to it or anything, but it is definitely heavily worn. The inside's pink. It's got good heel support, double neck rest. Inside here, no case candy, sorry. But the rest of the case is looking pretty good here. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this first year 1998 Gibson Les Paul Standard Double Cut, feel free to check out that link in the description that will take you to the Reverb for Sale page. Thank you, Troglodytes, for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.